Okay, so class, let's continue where we left off. What is the solution to E?
Is it E equals MC squared?
No, you imbecile! It's obviously E equals MC food! Man, I... oh, hey you! Yeah, you!
Oh?
Stop breaking the fourth wall, boy! Only I can. We are gonna continue making this anime classroom. We are first going to focus on my favorite texture of the scene, and that is the floor. So without any further ado, let's begin. Okay, so we are going to do the texturing. So I'm going to split this texturing into 3 parts, okay? We're going to do the base color, then the shadows, then the final touches, the highlights and so on. Alright, so let us go into the color. As you can see, I have a diffuse BSDF over here. And what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to use this to influence the shadow and the darkness values of the floor. Okay, but I'm going to put it over here for now. I'm not going to use it just yet. This is going to be part of the shadow of the shader or the texture. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to bring in a noise texture. So what I'm going to do now is I want to add some color variation on the floor. As you can see in the render over here, it's not super obvious, but throughout the floor there are different splotches of different shades of brown. We don't want a uniform brown color all over the floor. We just want a little bit of interest or variation on the floor so that it's not just one monochrome color. Alright, perfect. So this is what this noise texture is going to do for us. So I'm going to press Ctrl T. If you don't have Node Wrangler enabled, you can just go to Edit, Preferences, and enable Node Wrangler. Okay. So now I have a noise texture with the mapping node and the texture coordinate node. This is important so that we can change the shape or rotation or the location of our noise texture. So I'm going to press Ctrl+Shift+Click to view the noise texture, and then I'm just going to scale it up. I'm going to up it to maybe 29 and up the detail to maybe 12. So I'm going to put this over here for now, and under it I'm going to add a wave texture. So wave texture, and then Ctrl T that as well. Okay, so now I have a wave texture. Ctrl T. I'm going to up the scale to again 29. Let's view this. Ctrl+Shift+Click, and distortion up to 12. Now you might be wondering, what am I going to use the wave texture for? Well, as you can see, I tried to make my own custom wood texture without using an image, because we're already going to use an image for the tiles. So I don't want to use too many images for this one texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to create it procedurally. Also then I can control it within the shader. So that's why I have the wave texture, and I'm just going to make it seem like that is the patterns of a wood texture. Okay, so I up the distortion, and I'm going to up the detail, or lower the detail maybe, and up the detail roughness. So, and now the reason why we have the mapping node is so that we can rotate the wave texture. We rotate it by maybe 30, so that it's not straight like so. It will be a bit slanted. Okay, perfect. So this is how the wave texture is looking over here. This noise texture will come in later. I can delete actually this because I'm not going to use the mapping node of this noise texture. Okay, so after this wave texture, I'm going to add a color ramp. The reason why we add the color ramp is so that we can control how much black and how much white there is in the shader. So for example, if you want the wood texture to be very, very hard and sharp, you can obviously up the white scale, or you can even up the black scale, like so. But for me, I'm just going to up the white scale, maybe around here. Perfect. And now I'm going to add a mix color. This is going to be the basis for the dark parts of our shader. So I'm going to plug this into the B socket of that mix color, set the mix color to multiply, Ctrl+Shift+Click so that we can view it. Alright, so now as you can see, it's kind of darkening the areas where there is black of the texture. So if you want it less dark, you can lower the factor, which I'm actually going to do now. I'm going to make it maybe 0.1. Okay, I don't want it too obvious. As you can see in the reference, it's not very obvious, and I want to do the same actually. Now this is going to be the base color of our floor. This color, whatever we set this color to, is what the floor is going to end up looking like. Okay, even though these textures are going to edit it, this is going to be the base color. So we have to be very wise when choosing this color. Me personally, I'm going for a more light brown, so I'm going to up the brightness like so, and I'm going to bring the values just like so. I'm not gonna influence it too much with the saturation. I just want to make it a little bit like so. Okay, just so that it has color but not too much. So I'm going to duplicate this multiply, plug this into the A socket, And if you guessed already, I'm going to plug the noise texture into this multiply. So now we have 2 layers of darkness, one for the wood-like texture and the other for the noise texture. Let's press Ctrl+Shift+Click so we can see what this is doing. Okay, now when we up the scale, as you can see, it's darkening certain spots. So I'm going to up it a little bit more, maybe to 220. You can also obviously add a color ramp in front of it and then just influence where the dark patches are, as you can see. But I like it more subtle, so I'm going to delete that color ramp. But obviously it's up to you whether you want a color ramp or not. Then finally I'm going to add the last mix color in front of that, plug this into the A socket, and now I'm going to add the tile texture. This tile texture I custom made in Photopea. I will add the link down in the description for you to download, but it's a simple pattern of rectangles in a square fashion. So I'm going to bring in an image texture and then bring up that image. This is how the image looks. As you can see, it's just a tile texture of these 4 patterns across the entire floor, which is not a problem because, as you know, if you are constructing something, you're not going to construct it haphazardly, so it kind of makes sense for everything to be symmetrized on the floor, so there's no problem over there. What I'm going to do over here is I'm going to Control T this image texture. I already UV unwrapped the floor, but you will probably need to UV unwrap it and then obviously place it however you must or you want to. But yes, so now I'm going to plug this into the multiply of that mix color and then shift click, Ctrl Shift click. Okay, now you see there is a problem. The rectangles themselves are dark, but the indents are white. And all we need to do is we need to invert it. So I'm going to invert it with a color ramp. You can invert it with a simple invert node, but I want to invert it with a color ramp because then I can also control the slider at the same time. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to press flip color ramp. Bring the white all the way to the back, the black all the way down here, and then choose constant. Because I do not want the tiles to fade in, I want it to be hard like the image is. So plug in here and plug in here. Perfect. As you can see, we have now our indents causing darkness to appear on our floor and making it seem like there are tiles on the floor. Now that's perfect. This is the first part of our shader completed. All we need to do to finish it is to add a hue and saturation node, because now we can edit the value and the saturation and the hue of our floor. So in case you want to add a purplish or green tint, you can do so. If you want to, you can add more saturation without having to go into the colors and messing it up, and you can add more value. I personally would like to add a bit more value, so I would be 1.2. It looks pretty bright now, but later on when we add the shadows of the diffuse shader, then it will be way more diffused. Okay, but that is the first part of our shader. Let's Control J this. Okay, that is the color. I hope you understand the methods we used for this. We use the textures to add color variation in the bright and dark patches of the shader. We use the image shader and inverted the color so that we can add more patterns or image patterns on our floor, and we use the hue and saturation node to heighten, and maybe even in your case, if you want to, you lower the value or the brightness of your texture. So that is part 1 of 3. Now we are going to move on to the second part, which is to add shadows. Okay, so I'm going to now use this diffuse shader. I'm going to bring it over here. Now before adding the shadows, I'm going to add a gradient node. If you've been watching my other tutorials, gradient nodes are perfect for the anime style, at least in my case, because it allows you to add fake shadows, essentially. So I'm going to add shadows on the borderline of these walls. So as you can see, where the floor and the wall meets, I'm going to add a shadow between the floor and the wall, so that it looks like it's interacting with each other, which would be pretty nice. So I'm going to bring in another mix color. The reason why I don't duplicate this one is because it's simpler just to add a new one. So I'm going to bring that in and make it multiply, plug this into the A socket, and then bring in a gradient node. Plug that into the B socket, and then Control T it. Now let's Control Shift click. Okay, so now we see where the gradient is coming from. It's coming from the back. Let's view it. Yeah. So the darkness is over here and the white is over there. So what we want is we want the dark to be coming from both sides of the room, not from the front. We want it to come from the left and the right. Okay. So all we need to do for that is we just need to rotate the gradient node on the Z-axis. I'm going to rotate it on 90 degrees. And then all I need to do is I will move it a bit on the X so that it can move this way so we can see it. There we go. So now one side is sorted out, but now we need to do the other side. You can either duplicate the graded node and do the same thing but on the other side, or more simply we can add a color ramp. So let's bring a color ramp in, Control Shift click, and now we can bring the white in the center and make the black at the edges. Do you see what's happening right now? Since the color ramp has 2 black sliders, there will be 2 black sliders on the graded node itself. So that is perfect for our circumstances. If you want to, and you want to make the white a bit bigger, you can add 2 white sliders so that the darkness doesn't encroach on the white too much. So you have ultimate control. Perfect. Now that is now influencing our shader even more. Wonderful. We can make the factor a bit higher. I'll make it 0.9, I think. There we go. Or maybe 0.8. Okay, now we can finally plug this into the diffuse shader. So let's see how this looks. Boom. No, sorry, not normal. Color. Control Shift click. Boom. Okay, it does not look very impressive. I know. This is just the beginning, don't worry. Try not to edit it at this stage because this is the halfway stage. We're going to finish the texture and then you can edit it to your liking. Before we continue to the highlights and the editing of the whole texture, I'm going to bring in a bump node. The reason why I do that is so that I can add detail to the shader. Right now it's pretty flat, but if we add the bump node, it will be so that the light reflects off these indents of the floor, which will be very nice for us. So I'm going to take this color ramp, plug it into the height of that bump node, and then plug that bump node into the normal of that diffuse shader. Now do you see it already happening? It's already adding that nice detail to the floor. It's a bit too much, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower that bump node. So that's perfect for me right now. Now as you can see, it's a bit too dark, the floor. So we can fix that after doing the finishing part or touches of our shader. We can come back to this and then edit it as we see fit. So the final part is going to be the highlights on these bricks or these tiles. As you can see, they already exist, which is perfect. But what I want to do is I want to firstly make the places where the light touches the floor brighter than the rest, and I also want to make the highlights stronger. What I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this mix color over here, and I'm going to plug this diffuse shader into the A socket. Now as you can see, it turned red, and that is because anything with the green dot at the front of it will not be able to plug into anything that is not another green dot. So it's spoiled like that, you know, it only wants to touch the green dots. So we need to fix that. So what we are going to do is we're going to bring in a shader to RGB. Okay, boom. As you can see, there's the green dot. It converts the diffuse shader into the shader to RGB and then passes through to the mix color. So let us change this multiply mix color into a color dodge. This is now going to allow us to change the brightness values of the places where the floor is experiencing light. But when you press Ctrl Shift click this, you're going to see something different. It's just going to be applying the gray color that is at the bottom in the B socket. So what we need to do is we need to isolate where the light hits the floor from where the shadow hits the floor. And that is very simple. We can just duplicate, or we can bring in a color ramp, plug this into the shader to RGB. Just make sure we isolate the shadows from the light. So let's bring this up and bring this closer, and then we plug it into the factor. Now let's see what happens. Beautiful. Now we can just change it as much as we want. As you can see, the shadows aren't being affected so much as the light is. I'm going to raise the value and then make it goldish or orangish. There we go. So now the side that is influenced by the light will experience a more lighter orange color. And we can just up this white scale to 2, and we just need to up the white scale to add more of that. As you can see, it's way brighter. And I also see a problem where the wood texture is a bit too obvious. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to lessen it. So from dot 100 to dot 0.07 maybe. There we go. Perfect. Okay, looking good so far, I think. Maybe lower this a bit more at the moment. 2.6, good. And then let's move on to the next part of the highlights. That is going to be on top over here. So before we finish off this part of the shader, we are going to add an add-on on top of here, and that is going to be another bunch of mixed colors. So this is going to mainly be with regards to the highlights on the indents or in the indents of our shader. So let's Control Shift click this one, and we are going to bring the noise shader all the way from over here. We're going to drag this and plug it into the B socket. Boom. Okay, so it shouldn't be color dodge. This one should be multiply. Okay, and then we are going to add a color ramp that is set to constant. Okay, now the reason why we do this is now because we want to disrupt the edge lights. We don't want there to be a uniformity on all the edge lights of the tiles. We want it to be broken up a little bit. So I'm going to set this color ramp to constant. Alright, all I need to do is up this to 100% and up this to 100% as well. Now, that is because I don't want any inkling of highlights in the dark areas, so that there is a sort of disruption of the highlights. Obviously you could skip this step if you do not want that to happen. If you want uniform highlight lines, then you do not need to add the step. The next part is going to be with regards to the diffuse shaders. I'm going to duplicate the multiply node, plug this into the A socket, and plug this one. I'm going to duplicate the color ramp, plug this in here, and then plug this in here. Let's see now. Okay, but now there's a problem that I'm noticing, is that as you can see, due to the bump node plugged into this diffuse shader, these indents are shown as black. We do not want them to be shown as black because we want the highlights to appear in these indents. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this diffuse shader. It's not going to be connected to the normal map, and I'm going to plug it into this color ramp. Boom. There. Now as you can see, the indents are not part of the shader, which is perfect. We do not want that to happen. Let us bring this downwards, and I'm going to add one more part to the shader. I'm going to add it in between this diffuse shader color ramp and the noise texture color ramp. Going to be duplicated in the center. Bring this out by duplicating it, crunch it a bit more, and then I'm going to take this image texture all the way to this color ramp and plug it into this multiply mix RGB. Now you see, the reason why we use this color ramp and not this one is because this one is flipped. So that means the darkness will be the indents, and the light values will be in the brick texture or the tile texture. But this one is not flipped. So therefore the indents will be lit up and the tile texture will be darkened. And that is what we want, because we want highlights to be in the indents and not on the brick texture, because remember, we already have that happening over here. So this is perfect for us. Okay, so now that's done. All we need to do is add the color dodge that will add the highlights to the indents, which is perfect. Okay, final mix RGB or mix color, sorry. Bring this entire tree into the factor of this mix color. That should be set to color dodge, and then importantly bring in an emission shader. This is going to light up our indents. I'm going to plug this into the B socket. As you can see, it has a green outlet, so therefore it's red, and I just need to add a shader to RGB to pacify it, and then plug the texture or the entire texture tree over here into the A socket of that color dot mix RGB or mix color. So now when I Control Shift click this, hopefully you'll see some highlights. Kaboom! Yeah, highlights. Can you see them? Perfect. Now all we need to do is, if you want to, you can increase the emission, and if you don't want to, you can leave it at 1. And also you can change the color. Now we have our highlights separate from the highlights of the floor. So if you want to edit this over here, the floor highlights, all you need to do is either lower it so that it's less, or heighten it. And then obviously you can do the same to the indents highlights. You can either choose not to have the multiply and make everything uniform. This is how it looks when it's uniform. As you can see, it's all a straight line, or you can just increase it when you want it to be a bit more irregular.
But that is the floor texture of the scene. I know it is a bit long, but I wanted to make it a bit more detailed since a few of you requested it to be detailed in the comments. If you want the tutorials to be a bit faster, then by all means I shall do so. You should just mention those in the comments. But I want to give a special thanks to everyone on the Patreon, especially those on the Golden and Diamond Spoon tier list. Thank you so much for the support. The next tutorial should be shorter because the floor texture was probably the most complicated texture of the scene. Until then, I bid thee farewell. Alright, bye.